You've had a busy wee while producing a major report which has come out that looks at incomes of different types of families. There'll be a link in the show notes to the full report, but it's called Below the Income Floor, Modelling Income Adequacy for Low-Income New Zealand Households between 2018 and 2026. Why did the Child Poverty Action Group decide to produce this report, which is a major piece of work?
Yeah, we were interested in some of the drivers and also wanting to understand the sort of close to realistic understanding of the situation low income families are facing in New Zealand and understanding how they are kind of driven by direct political decisions, whether that's setting the rate of benefit rates or setting the rate for minimum wage, and understanding how over the years successive governments' decisions have impacted their financial situations and weekly budgets.
Yeah, because one thing I found interesting is that it uses a lot of the techniques and tools and models that were developed for the Welfare Expert Advisory Group, which, that's 6 years ago now. So, what did you do to essentially, redo that work and come up with some fresh numbers? Because, a lot's happened since 2018.
Yep. So we methodologically we try to be consistent with what was done with the WEAG group and their project. We'll have updated some of the figures, and we also expanded the number of model households we looked at. So, for example, one of the things, one types of household that was missing is sole parent with two children and couple with working couples with one children. And that's some of the comparison we're also interested, especially given the changing economic environment we're faced compared to when WEAG did the research themselves, which was pre-COVID time, which seems like a very different era now. So we are interested on what kind of changes have happened since then and what kind of policy impacts have done to address the situation since then, whether positively or negatively.
Yeah, because you've not every family's the same, and not every family has the same living costs, and those living costs change over time, as do the various benefit rates and indexation rates. So you've modelled 39 typical low-income households. So that's single parents with children, two parents, multiple children of different ages, those sorts of things. What did you broadly find was the case with those 32 households?
Well, broadly speaking, and I mean general knowledge is that with more children that we do the costs goes up for a household. And we did find that generally the trend was that situations was improving for many households in the past, I guess from 2018 to 2024. But from then, from 2024 onwards, for this year and next year, situation is getting worse for these kind of households. So by our kind of estimates and projection, next year, 26 of the 39 households will not have enough money for the basics and being able to take part of our society. And that's also, I also like to know that's a quite sharp growth because in this year, we see that number is at 20 out of 39. And then just in 1 year, six more households will fall on the sort of threshold we have set.
Yeah, let's dig into the issue of what are the costs and how the benefits are falling behind. So one thing that you did that I thought was interesting was look at the big three costs that poorer families face. So rent, food, and utilities. And I was surprised to see that just those three things alone. So we're not talking really about transport or any sort of entertainment or education or health, just rent, food, and the power. That is swallowing up between 62 and 98% of disposable income for beneficiary families, and it's over 60% even for working families. So, what's gone on there in terms of those basic costs? And why is it so? Is it always been that high?
Yeah, I think this kind of the way we presented this information is, in a way, try to be provocative and getting people to think about the bigger picture and really, really complex issue and challenges we're facing in our society. And in our view, food, housing, and keeping your house, keeping the lights on and keeping it heated are very, very fundamental to how we can have a secure and healthy life. And those are generally costs that are almost immovable in our expenditure without it being very, very dangerous alternative or harmful alternatives, such as going homeless or cutting meals or eating very unhealthy food to keep ourselves sustained. So that's a way, one of the way we try to present to be proactive to think about why that housing costs are not going down despite a successive government saying they're trying to do something about the rental market and housing affordability, and why is food costs continuing to grow up, and we're not seeing any change in that matter at all, despite government claiming they're doing something about inflation or supermarket duopoly and things like that. So these kind of findings, I guess, for us is trying to provoke and invite discussion about what is actually something we can do and see changes in these areas, because we also see that these income are not keeping up with the higher expenditure in these areas, and that actually impose very, very limited choices for these low income families, because these costs, these big three expenditure, you can't really cut corners in them otherwise without jeopardizing your health and your livelihood.
Yeah, I mean, just unpacking a bit what's happened in the last couple of years, because you mentioned things had improved a little bit between 2018 and 2023, and then 2024 and into 2025, things have deteriorated. What were the sort of policy changes and the environment changes that have meant there's been a significant deterioration in the last year or two?
I think looking at just on the income side, in previous government there was some focus in terms of making so what they have done is indexing the benefit annual adjustment to wage growth rather than the general CPI, but that decision has now been reversed and going back to the general CPI. And secondly, in the 2021 wellbeing budget, there's actually a drastic drastic manual boost to what the base rate of benefit payment are, trying to bring them up to an appropriate level, even though I will arguably say that was a partial attempt at it. It didn't go all the way.
Yeah, and since then, of course, the last 2 or 3 years, we've had significant inflation. In fact, inflation for food, rent, and utilities, particularly in the last 2 years, has actually been faster than CPI inflation.
Yes.
And the decision the current government made to change the indexation from wage inflation back to CPI inflation was bad enough as it was. It's one of those sort of apparently small technical changes which actually have a huge impact over time, because typically wage inflation has been, around double CPI inflation, which has generally run at 2%. But of course, this time around, we've seen food, rent, utilities rise even faster than CPI. So, what are the sorts of things that could be done to, offset this damage in terms of indexation? Because you could argue that, even wage indexation wouldn't keep up with the sort of inflation we're seeing in
Yes.
rent, food, and utilities.
I think looking at the more bigger and transformative proposal of this is that we need a drastic redefinition of what low income is. Right now, low income is means and involves being trapped in poverty and making difficult, tough choices every day. And that's how our economy is built and designed. What we need to think about and actually start from the point is that how can we build a new economy where low income simply means a secure floor, income floor that people can live on and go from there. Because the
And
current system is very dangerous, where low income is about precarity, insecurity, and going without.
yeah, because it's not just benefits as well. The minimum wage changes of the last couple of years have played a role. They've been significantly less than the inflation of these core costs of rent and food and utilities. How important was the minimum wage between 20 rises between 2018 and 2023? And therefore, how important is the real cut in the minimum wage in the last 2 years?
Yeah, it was quite important because it also had an impact in terms of the way that benefit rates are being adjusted because they were being tied to wage growth. So having a higher minimum wage adjustment to the sort of average CPI is beneficial to low income because that means they are better equipped to keep up with the rising cost of living. In the previous 2 years, where minimum wage went up by 2% and then 1.5%, and we're betting on that will go up by 1.5% again, which is lower than the general CPI. That means that minimum wage and benefit adjustments in the coming years will definitely just simply not going to be good enough to keep up with the cost of living and rising expenditures.
Yeah. Now, this is a what I'd call a shadow of the WEAG Welfare Expert Advisory Group work, and that group made some substantial recommendations. I think 42 recommendations to the then Labor-led government. Some changes were made, but what sort of recommendations did it make, and what recommendations would you make to the current government to improve the situation?
I think one thing I would pick up on is that sat with me was that we had recommended some nominal increases at the time about how our benefit should be adjusted. And I think Ganesh, who recently was a guest on your on the Kaka, was making a comparison between superannuation being tied as a percentage to our wage rate. And I think that's one of the ways we should start thinking about our welfare system, at least its transformation. What are some of the future-proof ways we can look at a welfare system, and also improving and investigating better how it interacts with our other systems, such as our tax system and our employment system? Because as other guests have also pointed out, and as we kind of alluded to, these systems actually right now is working against each other, and that's a very, very big problem, and it is trapping people, low-income families, in poverty.
Thank you very much, Harry Yushi from the Child Poverty Action Group, who's just put a lot of work into a major report, which we'll link to in the show notes that go out with this podcast and video on YouTube and on Substack for all. Harry, thank you very much for coming on to the show. Lovely to have you.
Thanks for having me, Bernard. See you.